Doctor Who has had viewers hiding behind the sofa since 1963. The Daleks, Chief Clown, Peg Dolls, and Miss Evangelista have given both kids and adults sleepless nights, but some of the scariest things about the show come from beyond the TV screen. I'm Ellie for Who Culture, and this is 10 Doctor Who scenes more terrifying when you know the truth. Number 10. The Tragedy of Skye Silvestri. As the host of the mysterious Midnight entity, Skye Silvestri is utterly terrifying, but in the moments before she gets possessed, she's pretty terrified herself. It's hard not to feel sorry for her as she retreats into the corner of the Crusader 50, knowing the creature has picked her as its first victim. And given that she's been dumped by her partner, she's not exactly in the best mental state to begin with, and that's putting it mildly. Even if the Midnight entity hadn't struck, her trip would have still been tinged with tragedy, because upon reaching her destination, the Sapphire Waterfall, Skye was actually planning to kill herself. This extra bit of backstory isn't explicit in the script, but as Russell T. Davies revealed on the episode's DVD commentary, there's one crucial line that gives the game away. Russell commented, "She's on her way to a waterfall palace, but she says I'm on a schedule," which is like, what for? What on earth are you going to a waterfall on a schedule for? Midnight is a scary episode as it is, but knowing that this was going on in the background and is potentially why the entity picked Skye in the first place makes it a whole lot darker, doesn't it? Number 9. The Cave of Actual Skulls. Doctor Who's second serial, The Daleks, saw the Doctor face his most enduring enemy for the first time. However, debut installment An Unearthly Child had sent the nascent TARDIS travellers to an environment that was arguably just as hostile. The Daleks might be proper monsters, complete with grating voices and metal tanks, but cavemen aren't much better. Nor is prehistoric Earth much better than the petrified jungle of Skaro. And if that wasn't bad enough, things were pretty grim behind the scenes too. Aside from the pressure of being the first Doctor Who story to go before cameras, there were all manner of unsavoury set dressings to contend with. Shrubbery ridden with insects, fur skins ridden with fleas, and for the Cave of Skulls set, countless replica skulls, with some real bones thrown in for good measure. Yep, that's right, Doctor Who's first ever story featured actual human bones sourced from an abattoir. As you can imagine, under those hot studio lights, they didn't exactly smell like roses. A stark reminder of how different production standards were in the 60s compared to today. Could you imagine if that's what they did today? Ooh. Number 8. The Landlords Nightmare. With its creepy crawlies, wooden lady, and omniscient landlord, Knock Knock is one of the most unsettling Doctor Who stories in recent years. But like the best haunted house stories, it's the tragedy rather than the scariness that unnerves you the most. In a shock twist, we learn that the spooky happenings at 11 Cardinal Road are the result of the landlord trying to protect his mother, with the house absorbing its tenants to extend her lifespan. The only way this twisted tale can end is with a mercy killing, with Eliza sacrificing herself and her son to the lice. This scene required little acting from David Suchet, who had found himself in a similar predicament 50 years earlier. As he recalled on Doctor Who The Fan Show, he once rented a room in Liverpool with nothing more than a horsehair mattress and an old woolly coat in the way of bedding. On one occasion, the young Suchet went to bed only to wake up covered in wood lice. Being able to pull on a memory that traumatic clearly aided Suchet's performance, and it makes it even tougher to watch when you know that something similar actually happened to him in real life. Number 7. The Drunken Yeti. The Yeti were one of 60s Who's most memorable monsters, and together with the Cybermen and the Ice Warriors, spooked a whole generation of children. And as it turns out, life playing a Yeti was just as terrifying. One scene of their mostly missing debut story, The Abominable Snowmen, involved a particularly precarious moment. As Professor Travers actor Jack Watling recalled in an interview, he said, "There was a low-angle shot with us looking up at the Yeti on the horizon. Suddenly, one of those Yeti fell off. He bounced hundreds of feet down. We thought he's killed himself." Fortunately, the actor in question was perfectly fine. Amazingly, his seemingly fatal fall had been cushioned by the foam rubber of his Yeti costume. As for why he'd taken a tumble, well, the cast reportedly enjoyed a drink or two between takes. A robot Yeti roaming the Himalayas is terrifying enough, but a drunk robot Yeti roaming the Himalayas scarcely bears thinking about. No wonder they left this moment out of the animated reconstruction. Number 6. Doctor Who's Pandemic Parallel. Despite being produced pre-COVID, Revolution of the Daleks featured some rather timely imagery, with the Doctor locked in prison and forced to self-isolate from her fam. Flux was the first series of Doctor Who to be produced in a post-COVID world, and also featured parallels to the pandemic. But on this occasion, they were completely intentional. Most notably, the Flux itself was inspired by COVID, as former showrunner Chris Chibnall recently confirmed, saying, "I mean, Flux is a metaphor for COVID. There's a big thing coming for you, a massive thing that's going to disrupt all life as you know it." This was implied in the episodes themselves, with Belle's opening monologue in Once Upon Time time being a clear giveaway. The biggest changes to our lives start small, catastrophes creeping quietly, and by the time you realise the life you once had is already behind you. The Flux has much in common with COVID beyond this. It's relentless, deadly, and takes many prisoners, with those that do survive finding themselves in a world that has changed forever. And Tecteun explicitly refers to the Doctor as a virus. Anything too explicit would have been an unwelcome reality check in a show that's supposed to be escapism. But it was inevitable that the circumstances affecting Flux's production were going to creep into the scripts one way or another. Number 5. The Sheriff's Secret. For Doctor Who's Robin Hood episode, writer Mark Gatiss paid homage to the 1980s drama Robin of Sherwood, choosing the title Robot of Sherwood. This was a reference to Robin's nemesis, the Sheriff of Nottingham, who, in a shock twist during the final battle, was originally supposed to be decapitated and exposed as a cyborg. This key moment was cut from the finished episode in truly tragic circumstances. In the months leading up to the broadcast, headlines were dominated by the terrorist group ISIS, who had been releasing horrific beheading videos online. And just days before Robot of Sherwood was due to go out, the group claimed their latest victim, US journalist Stephen Sotloff. Less than 48 hours later, the BBC announced that an edit had been made to the episode. And because early cuts of the first 5 Series 8 episodes had leaked earlier that summer, fans were able to quickly put 2 and 2 together. Sure enough, when Robot of Sherwood aired, the decapitation scene present in the early cut, which can still be viewed online, was absent. It was completely out of the team's control, but nevertheless cast a saddening shadow over the episode. Number 4. Milm takes a tumble. Black Orchid isn't just any old historical, it's a pure historical. As such, the villain is not some alien menace, but the entirely human George Cranley. Cranley's disfigurement, the result of a run-in with an Amazonian tribe on a search for the titular Black Orchid, is unfortunate, particularly in light of the recent Davros discourse. Likewise, the idea that the experience should leave him deranged and murderous is questionable. Regardless, this is the direction the story goes in, concluding with Cranley having a fatal fall from the roof of his family home. It's a sticky end, and as Peter Davison recalled on the episode's DVD commentary, it was almost as painful for the actor playing Cranley, Gareth Milne, whose stunt went horribly wrong. Davison recalled, "You can actually see him push off too far as he goes off the side of the roof. Half of him missed the boxes, and his legs went slapping into the concrete. It was a very, very nasty moment. I don't think he broke anything, but he was very badly bruised. And to this day, there have never been any more pure historicals. Can't think why." Number 3. Ood conversion. It's not just the way a monster looks that makes them scary, it's the reason they look the way they do. This was the case for the suited Silence, the cloth-faced Mondasian Cybermen, and the bandaged Foretold. It was also the case for the Ood, not because of their mottled skin and pink fronds, but because of their translation orbs, which are stitched into them by the merciless Ood operations. It's an ironic name for a company that literally performs surgery on its workforce, removing their secondary hindbrains to make the necessary alterations. It's a grim thought, but the Ood as we know them have been mutilated. Planet of the Ood writer Keith Temple originally planned to make this more explicit, with a sequence set inside the abattoir-like conversion centre. Though deemed too horrific for the finished episode, this material was reinstated in the recent Planet of the Ood novelisation, which reads, "The hydraulic system of surgical devices hanging above the conveyor belt a short distance away had one purpose: to amputate natural Ood's hindbrains." So if you thought that Donna went through the ringer seeing the Ood in the cage, well, her trip to the Ood sphere was nearly much more harrowing. Number 2. The Toymaker's Curse. The Toymaker is currently plaguing the Doctor and his friends, just as he did 57 years ago. And on that occasion, his influence extended far beyond the episodes themselves. During his debut story, the Toymaker forces the Doctor to complete the Trilogic game, a puzzle that involves moving a 10-layer pyramid from one point to another, one piece at a time, all in less than 1,023 moves. The Celestial Toymaker was a favourite story of Stephen actor Peter Purves, and so the Trilogic game prop was gifted to him as a memento. However, following his departure from the series a couple of stories later, Purves struggled to get work. He came to see the prop as the source of his bad luck, so much so that he decided to throw it away. Things got even spookier though when the very next day, Purves was offered work for the first time in ages, a part in the BBC police procedural Z-Cars. Within weeks, he was also a presenter on Blue Peter, a show that would keep him in steady employment for the next 11 years. Could the Toymaker's curse strike again? If Catherine Tate steals a prop, chucks it away, and then ends up becoming the next Blue Peter presenter, don't be surprised. Number 1. HDs Haunted House. Doctor Who has had its fair share of haunted houses over the years, and some of them are just as creepy in real life. Field's house in Newport, which became the Weeping Angel-infested Wester Drumlin Islands in Blink and later the Landlords premises in Knock Knock really was in a sorry state when the crew filmed there, and thus required little work from the art department. Similarly, the disused Custom House on Cardiff's Bute Street, which appeared in The Caretaker, is not somewhere you'd want to find yourself alone on a dark night. But none of these beats the haunted house that really is haunted. In 2013's Hide, the Doctor and Clara find themselves at Caliburn House, where a professor and his assistant are trying to solve the mystery of the Witch of the Well. One of the locations used was the 19th century Gothic mansion Margam Castle, which has reportedly received visitations of its own from a murdered gamekeeper, a burly blacksmith, and giggling Victorian children. Spooky. In universe, the witch was actually a trapped space traveller trying to escape from a pocket universe, but Margam's real-life hauntings remain unexplained to this very day. Ooh. And that's everything for this list, but for some more spooky Doctor Who stories, then check out 10 real things that prove Doctor Who exists. In the meantime, I've been Ellie with Who Culture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.